The Juan Soto sweepstakes are heating up, and the Blue Jays are making the first move. They're going to meet with him today, and they're hopefully going to get out in front of some of the other teams that are trying to poach him away. But the Blue Jays are in this. We knew that they were going to be in this. Now, can they get the job done? Can they seal the deal? Something that they weren't able to do with Ohtani. We'll break that down and much more on this episode of Jays Digest. Welcome in, everybody, to Jays Digest. I'm your host, Peter Vryonis, alongside host Nick Gosse. And Nick, I feel like we're doing it to ourselves again. We're setting ourselves up for failure here, but I don't know how you're going to approach this situation. I'm going to take a more cautious approach. I'm not going to have both feet in the door before I see pen to paper. And I kind of said that during the Otani stuff, but I allowed myself to get carried away. I'm not going to do that this time, okay? Until I see something official, until I see Soto wearing a Blue Jay cap in front of Sportsnet cameras, I'm not going to jump to any conclusions here. But Nick, this is a great first step. Some might see Soto meeting with them this early being a bad thing. Personally, for me, I'll look at it in the other lens that it's a good thing. That I think that uh, allowing themselves to meet with him early will give them a chance to pivot to something else if things don't work out. At least you're not delaying it till the very end and waiting till winter meetings to start talking to the guy. That's how I see it. I think this is a positive. There's no bad way to put this. The Blue Jays are meeting with him. That's a good first step. Let's see where it leads to.
Yeah, we're doing it to ourselves again. I'm going to be more optimistic because I just want to be. But looking at this, stuff has really started to heat up over the past 12 hours, Peter. I know we've been texting off camera about it, and we can kind of go through the process. So it started with John Heyman yesterday night dropping an article saying the Blue Jays could play spoiler in the Yankees and Mets sweepstakes. And you can see the last paragraph. It says the Jays are viewed by industry sources as a viable obstacle to the favored Yankees and Mets thanks to a well-heeled ownership and strong incentive to improve, coming off of course, the disappointment last season. And the word is they are highly motivated, and sources suggest they plan to be in big. So, Peter, we saw this. Everybody was very excited and things like that. And of course, we have some other reporters, some notable ones. Hector Gomez is usually familiar with, some of the players, especially in free agency last year, got a couple things right. So said, I can confirm. So, fans being optimistic like they are. But Peter, this morning, Jeff Passan dropped another bit of information. Jeff Passan is by far the most notable reporter out of all these. Whether you want to believe Bob Nightingale, who has them going to the Blue Jays, whether you want to believe John Heyman, Jeff Passan is the most objective one here, and it says the Blue Jays have the first meeting this week. Red Sox are next, and then it's the Mets and the Yankees. The sweepstakes are heating up, and feel free to go watch or read the full article yourselves. But basically, it says, you can see this here, it's no wonder one of the biggest markets in baseball is lining up for the services. Soto is starting to take meetings with teams this week in California, and the Jays will be first, according to sources. After trying to land Shohei last winter, the Jays are serious about adding a star alongside Vladdy and are targeting heavily Juan Soto. So there's some other reports we'll dive into as well. But Peter, it's been it reminds me of the Shohei Ohtani situation pretty heavily here, but there has been now, I believe, 4 separate reports from different reporters linking Soto to the Blue Jays, and for the first time this offseason, we have clarity on when they're meeting with him, as well as the Blue Jays being heavily involved, according to Jeff Passan, who it's a bit, you can take every other reporter with a grain of salt. This guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, I'll say it this way though. I think it's better if the Blue Jays are in the background. Last year, it was a battle between between the Dodgers and the Blue Jays for Ohtani, mano y mano. Who's going to outspend the other? Who's going to be a more attractive destination than the other? It came down to those two teams. At least that's what we were being told, right? It came down to the Jays and the Dodgers won that battle straight up. Now it seems like it's a one-on-one battle between the New York teams, the Mets and the Yankees. Um, I don't know. Like I look at Juan Soto. I look at the way that this offseason is shaping up to be. I think he wants to be the guy on the team that he goes to. And with the Yankees, that's not possible. He may have better seasons than Aaron Judge. He may be better in the playoffs than Aaron Judge, but Aaron Judge is the captain of the Yankees. He was the highest paid player on the Yankees, obviously before they re-signed Soto, if that happens. And he is a Yankee through and through. Juan Soto hasn't been there long enough. So Aaron Judge is the guy on the Yankees. You go down to the Mets, sure, he'll be the guy there, but that is a big city, man. That's a big city with a lot of sports teams in it. They got a ton of great hockey teams in the state of New York. They got football teams that are occupying the presses every single day. They got a ton of different things that other people are going to be focusing on. So maybe he'll be the top dog on his baseball team, but he might be second fiddle to some other stars in the city. Whereas if he goes to Toronto, he is top dog right there, man. Alongside Austin Matthews, alongside some of those stars on the Leafs, he would be revered. He would be loved by an entire country, and there would be no question as to who the leader of the Toronto Blue Jays would be. He would be their best player unequivocally, and I think it is a match that makes perfect sense. I want to use an example of Chris Black, one of my favorite guys on Twitter, one of your faves too, Nick. He had an entire thread on why it would make sense for the Blue Jays to go after Soto and why it would make sense for him to come to the Toronto Blue Jays. First off, he mentioned that he's a very safe bet. So he's 26 years old. He's already one of the best players in baseball, not injury prone. So you don't have reservations about giving this guy a 10 plus year deal. He's going to be worth it every step of the way. Another reason was the lack of production that the Blue Jays have gotten from left-handed hitters, which is not much if we remember that. And another one was the fact that it's okay to dream. It's okay to have these aspirations. He mentioned Roger Clemens as a guy that the Blue Jays were not expected to get. He was still a very good pitcher, Cy Young caliber pitcher, and the Blue Jays outdueled the Red Sox, the Yankees, a ton of other teams to go out and get him. And they ultimately didn't keep him for very long, but still, they had Roger Clemens on the team, and that was not something that was expected. So they're in on him. They're in on him. I'm not going to set myself up for failure here, but they're in on him, and I think there's a legitimate chance that they're positioning themselves well here. I'll say it like that.
You sound like Ross Atkins right now at
Yeah,
a
yeah.
post-game meeting. But I think the biggest encouraging sign for me is, well, for one, I honestly, when the offseason began, aka, well, when the Jays lost in the regular season and nothing happened, I wasn't even fully convinced they were going to get a meeting with Juan Soto, to be honest. I didn't even think that was necessarily going to happen. I knew they were going to poke their heads in, but again, they're among four teams. I don't really consider the Red Sox a huge threat, but I mean, they could potentially be. And also, there's been reports that the Yankees have offered around $575 million. We know that the Yankees are actually a bit less likely to spend a ton of money on one player compared to the New York Mets and probably compared to the Blue Jays as well, considering where they are. So I don't know. I'm going to start getting my hopes up a little bit. I know we probably shouldn't, but things are starting to look encouraging. And regarding the first meeting, there's a couple ways. I saw a tweet from, I was the Blue Jays writer, basically regarding the order. It also just makes sense geographically to have this order because you're meeting with the Yankees and the Mets, who are both in New York. You're meeting them at the same time at the end. And we saw the Blue Jays were met with Shohei Ohtani towards the tail end, and that didn't work out the best. So I'm, again, this week, it's probably today or tomorrow, but I would assume today. And Peter, it's getting that time again. We might have to bring back
Yeah.
the Juan Soto watch streams, depending what happens. And I believe also I saw a tweet that he might actually make his decision before the winter meeting. So I'm not entirely sure if that's going to happen or not, but things could resolve here sooner.
No flight tracking.
No,
yet?
so maybe no flight
none of
track.
that?
This might end before the winter meetings, but I don't know. It's the verbiage of a lot of these reporters. It is similar to the Ohtani stuff, but I'm a bit more inclined to believe it. The more I think about it, the more it actually makes sense for the Toronto Blue Jays. Doesn't make sense for Soto, definitely in certain ways. That being said, I think for it to make sense for Soto, there's a couple other things the Jays would need to promise Soto regarding an extension for Vladdy and also making the team better. But looking at some of the other teams, I mean, the Mets aren't the best team in the world, and the Red Sox aren't the best team in the world, and those are some of the other finalists. So aside from the Yankees, the Jays are positioned very well here. And I have a weird feeling, just a gut feeling, he's not going to return to the New York Yankees. I think it's going to be a Mets and Jays. That's my prediction at this point, a Mets and Jays finalist with him probably going to the Mets.
Well, I'll say it like this. He'll go wherever he gets the most money. And Steve Cohen said that he's not going to be outbid for the services of Juan Soto. I read this story about Steve Cohen the other day that he wanted a house. His friend wanted the same house. And his friend said, I want to move in here with my wife. I'll give you $1 million to not buy this house. So Steve Cohen says, "What am I going to do with $1 million? I'll flip a coin for it." And then the guy said, "That's absurd. I'm not going to flip a coin for a house." So Steve Cohen hangs up the phone, calls his real estate agent, ups his bid to $14.8 million and buys the house. That's the kind of guy that you're competing with if you're Rodgers, if you're the Blue Jays front office. You're competing with the guy who will spend to no end. The Mets had the highest payroll in baseball this year,
And they still
and
did not.
150 million dollars of that was playing on different teams, like Max Scherzer, Justin Verlander. Those guys were getting paid by the Mets to play for other teams. So Steve Cohen, money is just an object to him, and there are no limits to what he will spend to make his team better and to make his team a contender. But I want to ask you this quickly, Nick, before we wrap up. Do you think him meeting with the Blue Jays first is a good or bad thing? Because I've seen some mixed reviews about it on Twitter or on Instagram, wherever you want to go for your news.
Yeah, it's a good point. I also want to quickly, briefly mention the Mets are a solid team. They're better than the Blue Jays at this point. I
They
just
made the
think that
NLCS.
yeah,
They made
exactly.
the NLCS,
They are.
Nick.
I don't think if the Jays make some moves, I think they could line up very well competitively with the New York Mets. That was my point. If any Mets fans are out there, they're not a terrible team. That was just my point. But regarding that, yeah, I don't think it really matters. I think it's just, I think it's just how they're gonna do it. I would say like initially you could see it as a bad sign because they're first, so they're probably the least competitive in the race. But then you see the Red Sox second, and I think it's probably objectively the fact that the Red Sox are probably the least likely team to actually get Juan Soto. But I don't know. I think it doesn't make a huge difference at the end of the day. It makes sense to me that he's going Mets and New York back to back. But surrounding the Blue Jays, I think I could see it as a positive sign as well. And the fact that they're getting a meeting, we also might get some more rumors now about how and reports about how the meeting went sooner than later, and they can pivot if things went very badly, or in all likelihood, it will they'll continue to drive each other's prices up. So I think it'll be somewhere in the middle. I don't see it as a positive or negative. I just see it as the way it is. But again, this is new news to me. I did not expect him to actually meet with the Toronto Blue Jays, to be honest. I thought there was going to be a lot of smoke, and then there'd be, hey, he just signs with the Yankees or the Mets. But he's meeting with the Jays this week.
Well, I think he's going to meet with as many teams as possible because that's what he said following the World Series loss. He's looking to get paid here. He's looking to set a record with this contract. So I think he's going to do his due diligence and meet with as many teams as possible. I'll give one good thing and one bad thing as to them being first. So the bad thing for me is that it gives you the chance to be forgotten by the end of the process. Like if you're meeting with him first, a team like the Yankees or the Mets can just make a final impression and then that'll be that, right? Like he won't even remember the first meeting that he took after 17 meetings with different teams around Major League Baseball. But the good thing about it is, like you mentioned, Nick, and like we mentioned earlier in the video, that if things go south, they're going to be able to pivot and they're not going to have to put all of their eggs into the Soto basket. They will at that current moment. They're meeting him today, so they will put all the eggs in the Soto basket today. But let's say he's kind of non-committal and not really showing the willingness to go there for the rest of his career. Then you could pivot to another free agent that will bolster your roster and make you a lot better heading into next season. So there's some good things and some bad things to it, but buckle up, man, because we're about to be taken on another ride here, and let's hope we don't get bamboozled like we did last year.
Yeah, I'm gonna
We
choose
might.
to. I'm gonna choose to believe. So may as well go on that route. Let us know down below what your thoughts are on this. Do you see it as a positive or negative that they're meeting with him first as opposed to last? Let us know. We'll see you guys soon.